Welcome in to the Volatile Podcast, the podcast by the common fan for the common fan. The Volatile Podcast serves as your weekly reminder that being a Vols fan is a terminal diagnosis that we all share. My name is Mac Williams. I'm joined tonight by my good friends Jeff Wright and Joe Davis. Jeff, how you doing tonight, man?
Man, I'm feeling that terminal diagnosis. I'm pretty black-pilled on UT Sports right now. So you're here for negative Nancy.
I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm also glad to hear that because we're going to have a good time, I think. Joe, how are you doing, bud?
I wish I could bring a more sunny disposition, but I too have some bones that I will pick tonight. We'll get to that, but otherwise I'm doing well. Glad to be on tonight.
Nice, yeah. Glad to have you boys here. It was just me and Nick last week, so we missed seeing you guys, and glad you guys are back. And we're missing Nick tonight, but we'll have him back soon, I'm sure. Let's jump into the latest news. Spring practice has started. Base football is in full swing as far as spring practice goes, and therefore that means the battle between GMAC and Faison is going on. Have you guys heard anything about that? Any thoughts early on, or just the fact that it's going on?
I mean, just podcast stuff, probably the same thing everybody's heard. You know, GMAC's still skinny. Apparently he's at 202, wants to get up to like 215 by the time fall camp starts. Faison looks the part, you know. It's one of those classic spring deals. Guys look good. You know, they're really zipping the ball, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
I'm just not happy about going into the season with a redshirt freshman and a true freshman and, 6'0" Ryan Staub coming out of Colorado. I feel like we just shouldn't have to be here as a program. But I'm rooting for the guys, and I hope one of them emerges really clearly and exceeds my expectations.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. That you just articulated something that I've kind of felt for a couple of years now, Jeff, which is this time of year is maybe the most frustrating for me as a Vols fan because there is no football, which is my first and truest love. And so, you're missing football and all the stuff you get about football. None of it matters. None of it is real. None of it is true. It's always the same stuff. And I don't trust any of it. Like these guys are, they're doing their job, right? These reporters, these podcasters, they're going on there. They're, getting whatever they can as far as observation and data, and then they're reporting to us, and I'm like, whatever, man. Like, none of it matters. So we'll see.
Well, they don't get to see anything either. Heupel has them shut out, right? They get to see like one session a day. I think the one they got to see on day one was the quarterbacks throwing to the running backs at like 15 yards. I mean, I don't know. I'm starved for information, but it almost feels I don't want to say insulting, but it just kind of feels like a humiliation ritual to be like, can I glean anything from a clip of them doing nothing?
Sure. Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of said it all. That was good insight there, boys. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, Jeff. Like, not to get too much in the weeds before we get started, but you said we shouldn't have to be here as a program, right? Here's my question. Let's say you back up. And Nico never transfers, right? So Nico has a second year where he's the starter. And let's just say, and I know you guys don't believe this, we all have, I would say generally negative feelings towards Nico. But let's just say for the sake of the conversation that Nico had a serviceable year, pretty good year, and maybe he decides, I'm going to go take my shot in the NFL. I'm going to go in the draft. We would be in the same position pretty much. So elaborate on that. Like, why is this different than that scenario, which was kind of a likely one maybe we thought of 2 years ago?
Because we threw a boatload of cash at Sam Leavitt.
Okay.
And I think we've talked about this previously, so I don't want to beat our regular listeners in the ground over it, but this is the mixed messaging from Josh Heupel.
Yeah.
And clearly you wanted to make a run at a big quarterback. And you get paid the bucks you get paid to put the best team on the field that you can. And so maybe he was just, I think I've said this already, so forgive me for belaboring the point. Maybe he just thought Sam Leavitt was otherworldly, perfect fit, something like that. But the fact you went and tried to throw big money at a big name quarterback makes me think that you're playing with your leftovers.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, so it's not necessarily the situation, like generally speaking, it's like how you've gotten there to this point.
Yeah, I mean, I want, we've talked about this also. I guess maybe I'm just on a merry-go-round and repeating myself. I do want a system that is developing quarterbacks over multiple years so that you've got a starter coming in with some exposure in the program. I just think the way we got to this one tells me that Heupel wasn't super thrilled about what he had on the roster or what he has on the roster today. And I just don't think we ought to be in that spot. Early
Yeah.
on, one of the things the VolQuest guys said about Heupel with his recruiting was that he had too small a board. So they would recruit, 5 or 6 guys, let's say, at any position. They miss on a couple of those. All of a sudden, they're scrambling because they hadn't recruited enough guys to even have a fallback plan. And it kind of feels like a quarterback room this year is in that same spot.
Yeah. Joe, do you agree with that, generally speaking? You feel like kind of the same sort of frustrations that Jeff has?
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know how to read the current situation positively, considering how we got here.
Yeah.
We're clearly not in the driver's seat, kind of calling and running our future, making our destiny. Right? It feels like we're scrambling. I don't know about the particulars enough to be able to say whether it's true that Heupel's not recruiting enough guys or he doesn't have enough foresight to have been able to plan for this. I think your point about, assuming that the Nico era of UT football had kind of gone the way we had anticipated it to go before he departed, would we still be in the same boat? I think that's a legitimate and fair critique, but it doesn't change the outcome for me in a sense that, whether that's true or not, if I actually think if it is true that we would have been here even if Nico hadn't left, it just makes it that much worse for me because it just seems like we have not yet attained the level of a program where we are elite at every level and just constantly kind of almost formulaic, by formula, turning and creating winning rosters year in and year out. It's like we got to catch lightning in a bottle. And so here we are, right? Hoping that one of these two guys, true freshman, redshirt freshman, just is lightning in a bottle. And if it is, we're going to be dancing, right? But most likely it's not. And here we are again.
Yeah. So. Jeff, I've got a follow-up question, but go ahead.
Well, I've actually got one for you. Listen to Joe talk. That scenario you laid out with Nico bouncing to the NFL. Do you think that Heupel would have went and thrown a bag of money at Sam Leavitt in that scenario too? Because I kind of feel like he would.
Yeah.
Based on what
I think, yeah, I guess. So I don't disagree with you guys at all. I'm not trying to be on the fence here or anything, but I guess I am just trying to be as positive as I can, looking at the situation, giving the benefit of doubt as best I can. So to your question, Jeff, yes, I think he probably would have offered a bag to Sam Leavitt either way. But I guess the reason why that doesn't bother me maybe as much as it does you is because to me that seems like just how you should operate in college football now. It's like, okay, we have our guy that we're comfortable rolling with, but we weren't expecting this really good guy to possibly be available. So we might as well just try and upgrade if we can. Now, you could argue that that's not good coaching in the sense of how you manage your team, because right now it's showing some lack of trust or maybe some envy towards George McIntyre, where it's like, hey, even though you're our guy, we like you. We're still willing to go get this other guy just because he's that much better. So I do think it, at a bare minimum, shows a little bit of lack of faithfulness, a lack of loyalty towards GMAC, which I don't necessarily like if you really do think that he's talented enough to be your quarterback. But at the same time, it's kind of just the era we live in where it's like you try and go get the best guys out of the portal every year if you can. And if not, then you ride with who you got.
Yeah,
well,
that's fair.
My rinse and repeat comment there is I can't make sense of that with Bro Pibula getting an invite. That tells me, that makes me suspect. Everything you said is reasonable. That makes me suspect that Sam Leavitt is not this huge fish, Moby Dick, that I've got to take, I've got to take every shot I can to get him because he's so perfect. Like, dude, you brought in a guy who was, I mean, would we agree he's mid? Can we meet on that?
You're
I think
talking
he's
about
bad about
you're talking
Bo.
about. Oh, well, we didn't bring him in, but yeah, had we brought him in, I would
I thought
agree
he
that
came in
he's.
for a weekend.
Oh, sorry, I thought you meant like came in like on the roster, like
Yeah.
the kid from Colorado.
They brought
That's
him
what I thought you were
in.
saying. Sorry.
Yeah, they brought him in to
Yeah,
kick
they
the
courted
tires.
him. Yeah. No, totally.
Yeah, and so even if you don't think he's as bad as I do, he's just mid. And
I would agree
so
with that.
you go chase the white. Well, okay, I can kind of talk myself into that. You bring in a guy who is, whatever, not impressive. I just think you've left yourself in a situation where you don't have a quarterback you believe in.
Yeah. My follow up, and we'll keep this brief because I don't want to stay on this too long. But I do think obviously football is king. Listeners like hearing us talk about football. So, my question was, and this is for both of you, really. So again, we're in this scenario. Nico stays. He goes to the draft. You're in this situation where you're going to be starting a young guy. Would you guys feel any better about this? And let's go ahead and say you don't offer the bag to Levitt. You don't bring in Pribula. Let's just say you have the guys on the roster. Is that within itself, not asking those guys to come here, does that within itself make you feel better about this season? Or is it still like, well, I'm still not confident because these guys are young without experience? Is it really just those details about who we kind of courted in the offseason that's making you feel so negative?
Joe, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's I guess it's what I think I might feel better because some of the signaling, at least as an outside viewer looking in, would communicate that this is, that these guys are developing and that they're ready to go and that they have the full faith and confidence of the coaching staff. I suppose that's possible that I might feel better about that. But, regardless of whether or not that's actually true, I don't know that I would be super positive about this season, whether or not, we had thrown the bag at somebody else or if Nico had stayed and this had been part of the plan, because these guys are young, they're inexperienced, they're undersized. And, we haven't really seen a lot. Like I think Jeff had started tonight by saying I'm starved for information, right? Like there's just so much unknown. Yeah. And that we don't have a proven track record. So I think I'd be pretty bleak either way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mac. I would feel better, and that sense of me feeling better, it has no relationship to reality. In the same way that my depression here has no relationship to reality. I'm trying to read fifth hand what the coach is thinking because you can't see it for yourself. You can't get accurate information. And so, I mean, this is the insufferable madness of being a Vols fan. You have no access, and they just trot it out on the field, and you have to deal with it. And it's a terminal condition. But yeah, I would legitimately feel better because I think it would communicate confidence.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that at all. I do think it communicates something, right? And so I'm with you guys there. Here's my last question on the matter, and then we'll move on. Now, let's say all the scenarios are the same that I just laid out, but GMAC had played in, let's say, 3 games last year. Like, what was it? The UT Chattanooga game that he didn't get it? Like one of the games against a bad opponent, he didn't play at all.
Yeah.
And so would you have felt better? Let's just say every opportunity that we had to play him within reason last year, Heupel would have played him. Would you feel better in this scenario?
If he hadn't looked catastrophic.
Sure. Right.
Okay.
That's more information.
Yeah. I mean, assume that he performs really well against bad teams. Right. Now that's you take that and you measure it against what it is you're actually seeing, which is UT Chattanooga. But if he went out there and just carved up UT Chattanooga, you're at least going into this year saying, okay, we know he can at least do, what he should be able to do against bad teams. Does that mean that he can do what he needs to do against good teams? We don't know, but at least we got something. We got something to know. Yeah. Right now we know nothing. So
it sounds like both of you are saying that would help you feel better if he had played more. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. That's my biggest, I think with this whole quarterback situation, I think that's my biggest issue is that Heupel has shown time and time again that he's not consistently getting guys in who need time on the field in games that don't matter. Like, I'm sorry. Okay, like Joey Aguilar wanted 200 yards passing in a game. Dude, if you can't do that in the first half against UT Chat, sorry. Like, I don't care about your stupid streak. Like, get over it. Like, either get the yards when you're in the game, but I'm not going to potentially detriment these guys, these younger guys' career, the guys that I got to build a program around where my job is on the line just because you have some record that we want to keep. Like, and I do understand that also helps Heupel in recruiting to be able to point to, like, well, look at the records we've set with this guy and, whatever. But, like, at the end of the day, I still believe that coaching is about developing players, helping boys turn into men, like all the kind of classical cliches coaching is still about that. And I understand you got to win, but like now you're in a situation where you have to win with GMAC or Faison either way. So why not just go play the guys more when you had the chance?
It's a great point, and it's so unique or so pointed with the quarterback.
Right.
You need reps at quarterback. I wouldn't care so much if we had a stud running back because like you grab the ball and you run. It just doesn't seem like it requires as many reps. How do you not get a young quarterback that you might need actual live passes in a game? I don't know, man. I'm really trying to talk myself into Heupel knows what he needs to do. I think there's good evidence that he does based on what he's done with the coaching staff, but this is insane. We just shouldn't have to be here.
Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead and move on. So Tennessee basketball, we drew the 6th seed in the Midwest bracket for the NCAA tournament, and we will play the winner of Southern Methodist and Miami, Ohio tonight. It's going on right now. That's why I keep turning back. I'm checking the score. So, yeah, that game is going on now. So we'll play the winner of that game. I don't know if you guys saw this. This is kind of in the latest news category. But so Southern Methodist, SMU, they have B.J. Edwards, who used to play at Tennessee a couple years ago. He's finished his career up at SMU. I think he's like a junior or senior now. But he's been out the last 6 games. He's had a really good season, and he's been out the last 6 games. SMU was 1-5 in their last 6 games without him. And he was basically like, the vibe I got from listening to some podcasts is basically like the tournament committee, whoever decides, the seedings and all that stuff, they kind of didn't want to put SMU in. And because they were like, B.J. Edwards haven't played, they don't look like a very good team. But then SMU was like, no, he's good to go. But it just came out today that he's not playing in the game tonight. So I don't know if he's going to play. If they win, I don't know if he'll play against Tennessee or not. But that was just an interesting thing. And of course, being the Volatile Podcast and being being diagnosed terminally, I was like, well, for sure, if he plays, he's going to go off and probably knock Tennessee out in the first round because that's how this would go, of course. But
now that you've said it, I assume it's going to happen. So thanks.
But let's see. It's 7-7 right now.
Hey, can I say this?
We'll see what happens. Yeah.
That's shady as heck on SMU's part, and I love it. I'm so glad somebody did that to the NCAA committee. I mean, like they've been so awful over the years that somebody can manipulate them is just sweet poetic justice. So like now I'm an SMU fan.
Hey, always were because of the what was it called, the Pony Express, right?
That,
where their pro football program got condemned and anyways, but yeah, they SMU got done dirty a few years ago, and when the NCAA still had power, and I mean they were playing dirty, but everyone was doing it.
Yeah, it was just them. So. It was just them.
Yeah, right. And the other bit of latest news is Tennessee baseball. We had our first SEC series this weekend against Georgia, and we dropped that opening weekend series in SEC play 1-2. So we won Friday night and lost Saturday and Sunday. We'll get into the details of that later. Obviously, listener. If you watched or if you followed along, that was a tough series. But we'll talk about that later, and we have a lot of thoughts. Let's go ahead and jump into basketball since that's kind of hot and heavy right now with the NCAA tournament going on. So the draw that Tennessee got, we are the 6th seed, and we're playing the winner of SMU and Miami of Ohio, which again is going on right now. So guys, Jeff, let's start with you. How do you feel about playing SMU or Miami of Ohio?
Yes, I didn't watch either one of those teams play in the regular season. I basically watch SEC and ACC, and then whatever like big game there is, on ESPN or whatever during the season. What I've read is that Miami of Ohio won like 31 games this year?
They lost their first game in their conference tournament.
Yeah.
They were undefeated until the last game they played.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm sure they're less talented than we are. I'm sure they're not comparably sized to Tennessee, but that just seems like a more potent team. Even than, I would assume SMU probably has a higher college basketball EA Sports ranking, in terms of their talent, just
Right.
because of conferences and whatnot. But it sounds like SMU is much more one-dimensional. And that team won a lot, and Miami of Ohio won a bunch of games. So if I have to pick one, I'd rather not play Miami of Ohio.
Yeah, I hear you. So Miami of Ohio, Jeff, kind of what you're saying. They did not play, even in their non-conference slate, where they would traditionally play like some bigger, more like, Power 5 teams. They didn't play any good ones, basically. So they played bad teams even when they had to play better teams than them, which obviously it still takes you have to be pretty good to go undefeated in basketball. Like, it's not easy to go undefeated in basketball, kind of similar to baseball. Like, you're going to drop games, even ones that you should win. So the fact that they've won every game does mean something. There was a lot of people kind of advocating for them not to get into the tournament because they lost in the conference semifinals of their tournament. But if a team is 31-1, they should get in. I mean, we're letting, Prairie View into the tournament. Like, why are they not getting in if they're 31-1? I just, they seem like a no-brainer to be in. And the people
and
that
what
are
would
kind
the
of
alternative be? Would we put Auburn in the tournament? Like,
yeah,
these guys won games. I'll take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is sounding eerily like a debate we had in the past, but I'll let those.
Except for it's basketball and football is completely different.
I'll let those sleeping dogs lie.
It's a 68 team tournament. It's a 68 team tournament compared to a 12 team tournament. Like, come on, man.
If I were wearing a cap, Joe, I would tip it to you.
Goodness gracious, that's ridiculous. Goodness gracious,
it's
Joe.
Not ridiculous.
That is absolutely ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's crazy. It's not ridiculous.
There are 68 teams. You have to let some of the mid-major, and basketball is completely different than football. It's completely different.
I mean, I don't see how it's that different. If Miami of Ohio and Auburn played 10 times and Auburn won 9 of 10 games, why wouldn't you put Auburn in above them? How is it that different? I don't think it's that different.
I don't even understand what that question has to do with
the argument. I think my work here is done.
The joke that Jeff made was, who would we put in instead of these guys? Would we put Auburn instead? Auburn clearly doesn't deserve to be in the tournament. But if Auburn and Miami of Ohio played 10 games and Auburn would win 9 of them, then Auburn's clearly the better team. Then why wouldn't you put them in?
Right, because it's a balance in basketball, right? It's a balance of, well, first of all, every conference, just similar to football, every conference gets an automatic bid, but it's not just the Power 4 like in football. It's every conference across the board. The basketball has determined that to an extent more than football, that the SEC is going to get the same automatic bid that the MAC would, even though in football that's not the rules. That's not how it's laid out. And so they've just determined it differently, and it's a different tournament. It's completely different. I mean, it's 16 teams versus 12. I mean, different sport, different tournament.
I don't want to totally logjam the podcast this way. The difference maker for me, and you said this already, is that because the NCAA tournament is so much larger, I think that's the difference maker. But everything else is not as different as you're making it sound. It's, to me, the big difference is just, well, we let everybody in basically in the NCAA tournament. So
yeah, and by percentage, they let in a lot more teams than football does.
Right. So I think that's the big argument. Everything else you said doesn't matter to me. But I
enjoyed this tremendously. Thank you.
Goodness gracious. Yeah. With all due respect, you guys can shut up.
With all due respect, and by that I mean none.
I just love to hear you make my arguments for me. That's really enjoyable.
I wasn't doing that, but that's all right.
A little bit though. A little bit.
No. All right. So assuming that Tennessee can take care of business against SMU or Miami of Ohio, which isn't a given, but of course they should win. Tennessee should win either of those games. So assuming you win against that opponent, how do you like our chances in the round of 32 against Virginia?
You want to go, Joe?
Let me go first because you probably have more insight than I do. The bottom line for me is none of it matters if you can't score, and this team cannot score. So how do I like our chances? I don't like our chances against anybody. Miami of Ohio, SMU, Prairie Dog School, whatever. It doesn't matter. I don't know. It doesn't matter who you're playing if you cannot score. And this team consistently has proven that they are as inconsistent as any team I've ever watched, which admittedly is not as much as everybody else, but as any team I've ever watched in being able to score. So, no, I don't like our chances. I think we get bounced in the round of 32. So,
I mean, I'm largely in the same place. Virginia's not good. The ACC's really not good this year. I thought North Carolina had a pretty good team with Caleb Wilson. Duke lost 2 starters. Those were the only 2 teams I thought were of any merit in the ACC this year. Virginia's not good. But Tennessee can literally lose to anybody. Now, could we, in theory, could we beat a whole bunch of teams that are going to finish further ahead in the tournament than we are? Yeah, absolutely. But it just feels like playing the odds. We're going to lose to some team we shouldn't. And Virginia is very eligible to be that team.
Yeah. So it sounds like, how would you guys answer? So do you like our chances was the first question. What do you guys think? Can Tennessee win this game? I think your answer would both be yes, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Can win this game?
Absolutely. We rebound better than anybody in the country. We play lockdown defense. We keep it low scoring. And honestly, I thought as a whole, I don't know if the numbers bear this out. I'm just talking about the eye test. The back half of the season, especially like SEC tournament play, I thought they did a really good job of not turning the ball over, which was a real big problem pretty much throughout the entire regular season. So if you clean up those fundamentals and score, you could beat anybody, but it's, we have 5 shots on the glass and come away with 0 points. So you're not going to win. You're not going to win basketball games that way.
Yeah. It takes getting to teams like Arizona or Kansas for me to say Tennessee could not beat this team.
Yeah. Okay.
But that doesn't mean that I think they're going to win. I assume they're going to drop a game they shouldn't.
Okay.
They can. They're just not.
The last question I had regarding Virginia, and you guys have already kind of touched on this, is I want to go ahead and just get into predictions, I guess. Do you expect, if Tennessee wins round 1, do you expect Tennessee to beat Virginia? Yes or no?
No.
So I've really bounced back and forth. So when we first got the draw, I was pretty optimistic because obviously I think that we're better than SMU and Miami of Ohio. I think we'll win that game. I expect to win that game. When we play Virginia, because of who this team has shown themselves to be, it's hard for me to expect us to beat Virginia. But I know, truly, I know that if Tennessee hits their free throws down the stretch and rebounds the ball well and limits turnovers, I do expect them to beat Virginia. I think we are the better team. But to predict that they're going to win is really hard based on everything this team's shown you. So I think I would rather just predict them to lose and then be shocked and be happy if they win. And I think all of us at some point throughout the season have said this team's not going to make it out of the first weekend. And so I think we would all say, and disagree with me, please, if you do, but I think we'd all say that a successful postseason for this team would definitely be getting past the first weekend, right? If they beat, let's say, SMU and then they beat Virginia, you're going to be like, yeah, I feel like Rick Barnes, with what he's had, with what this team's proven themselves to be, I feel like he got them to a point where I wasn't expecting.
Well, see, here again, I'm going to talk about the insufferable madness of being a Tennessee fan. Every step of the way until they, in some quantum theory universe, made it to a Final Four, based on the resources expended, based on the talent on the roster, based on the prestige of the program, we should have won up until that point. So I'm going into an NCAA tournament where I believe we should beat most of the teams we play, but we will virtually certainly lose to a team that we should not have. And so, Mac, it could be just because I'm so frustrated right now as a Vols fan, but no, I wouldn't call it a good. I wouldn't see it as any positive for Rick Barnes if they beat Virginia. That they should. It's just that I don't believe this team can go anywhere. And so, they should be better. Their expectations should be that we cruise through those games. But this team is fatally flawed.
Yeah, for me, it's about how do you win and how do you lose, right? And this team is infuriating to watch because they do so many things that other teams really struggle with, that you hear all the time. Well, if we could just rebound, if we could just play defense and limit second chance points for the opponent, if we could just clean up the turnovers, right? Like, we could be successful. This team does so many things well except score. And so for me, it's like the most fundamental thing you have to do to win a basketball game, we can't do. And I don't know how to feel positive about the season in any shape or form if that's how you get bounced, right? So you make it through the first weekend, great. But if you get bounced because you cannot score, you lose a game, I'm thinking you get bounced losing a game 77-63, right? Or 65-55, right? And it's because, well, and every stat sheet that when you look at that game, it's like, well, Tennessee out rebounded the other team. We had fewer turnovers than the other team. We had more free throw shots taken, maybe not made, but we had more free throw opportunities than the other team. None of our guys fouled out. We played lockdown defense. We held this really good offense to 70 points or 65 points. But why did we lose? Because we couldn't score. And it's just like, how are you supposed to feel good about that? How are you supposed to walk away thinking, yeah, that was a successful season? We did all the things that most teams struggle with except score points. I don't know how to feel good about that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So kind of going back to the assuming game here and just kind of and looking at Tennessee best case scenario. So let's say they do make it to the Sweet 16, and their likely opponent there is Iowa State or Kentucky. That's probably who you're going to end up facing in the Sweet 16 if you make it that far. How far do you think this team can go if let's just say they make it past the first weekend, you're in the Sweet 16? Is that where you see us getting bounced, or do you think we can beat one of those teams and make it to the Elite Eight? Where do you think the road ends for Tennessee if they play well and they get out of the first weekend?
They've already proven that they can beat Kentucky, right? Except that they can't beat Kentucky, right? But they've shown that they can play and even have dominating leads against that kind of caliber of talent. So yeah, I mean, if they got that deep, and again, how you win, I think, matters. So if they get through the first weekend and they're making, 40 to 50% from the field, right? If they're shooting 45% from the field instead of 27 or 36% from the field, right? If they're hitting, 6 out of 10 free throws instead of 2 out of 10 free throws, or whatever. So if they're winning by cleaning up the things that have stopped them from winning in the past, then like classic Vols fan, you start to think, oh, well, we figured it out. Well, now I think we can get to the Final Four, maybe. Who knows? So it's how you win, I think. That would move the needle for me on, do my expectations change mid-tournament?
I don't think this Kentucky team is very good. And so I won't be surprised if Kentucky's not there waiting on us. But if we play Kentucky at that round, I assume we'll lose to them. That's the track record says.
The data bears that out.
Yeah,
and yeah. So what if it's Iowa State, which is technically the obviously the higher ranked team and the better team? You feel better or worse compared to Kentucky with Iowa State?
I think I saw Iowa State for like a half this year. I assume that we're more talented than them, but I can't bet on this team. They're going to go into a drought at some point and lose a game. That's just what they're going to do. And so, guys, I will be frustrated. I'll be angry. I'm telling you, I will not be surprised if they lose opening game. I just will not be surprised. If they lose their second game, I will not be surprised. I'll be frustrated, angry, and, a Vols fan, a volatile Vols fan. But I won't be surprised any step of the way if they lose.
Yeah. No, I hear you guys. I mean, I'm not quite as down on this team, generally speaking, as y'all are, I don't think. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. Like, I think maybe you guys have a better, more sensible read on it than I do. I just still see enough where I'm I guess holding on to whatever bit of hope there is left that this team can figure it out. And I think I would say personally, if this team can make it past the first weekend and you lose to Iowa State in the Sweet 16, I'm going to feel like this team did enough for me to be content with how the season played out. Obviously, I think at that point it's like kind of house money a little bit because I did not think this team was a Sweet 16 team. Now, I will say before the season started, before I saw them play at all, I would have said success is defined by making the Elite Eight. That's what I would have said. But I'm trying to kind of align with you guys as far as how we looked at football with expectations being allowed to change and trying to say, okay, if I'm going to allow my expectations to change, then obviously since the season's played out, my expectations have only gone down. In which case, them making to the second weekend, making it the Sweet 16 is a net positive result for me. But to stand by my football argument, if they don't make it to the Elite Eight, regardless of how it plays out, whatever, then this season would be a failure.
Well, and what I was going to throw in there, Mac, is that this team and everybody associated with it should be embarrassed if they don't make it to an Elite Eight. They should be ashamed of themselves if they don't. They're not going to, but they should hang their heads. And I mean, they're just not delivering. They're parasitically not delivering.
Yeah.
This is a dark episode. I'm sorry to be so daggum dark, but like, it's just a rough patch, man. It's just a rough patch.
No, it's good. We're about to have a good time here with this discussion. So, listener, Jeff and I recently got into a little discussion via text about the first 4 games and just how they operate in the NCAA
Everybody watching on video can see how slavishly Mac is paying attention to this game that means nothing.
It does mean something, and it means a lot, and we're going to talk about it. So, the question is, are the first 4, which is how they're termed, are the first 4 games meaningful? That's the question. Are the first 4 games meaningful? So I want to clarify the discussion before we get into it. I'm not discussing whether, and we're not discussing whether they should be meaningful, as if, there's no, like, do I agree with how the NCAA tournament has, or, the committee, whoever, the NCAA, generally speaking, is in charge of this. Do I agree with how they've laid it out? That's not the discussion. The discussion is based on the current setup, based on what the NCAA has said, are these games meaningful, yes or no? Jeff, I'll let you go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to yield the field of contest to you. You say they are. You have, you have the fact that the NCAA tournament gets to define itself on your side. I just can't care about these games. And I can't bring myself to consider them part of the NCAA tournament. Something we did off air that it's just the best illustration of my point after I've already yielded that the objective facts are on your side. Will you feel more threatened by either one of those teams in a way that, if Tennessee loses to one of them, it'll mitigate how you feel about Tennessee's loss?
No.
Short of Tennessee playing in one of these games or one of your own children. Well, actually, this is different for you. You're watching them. For me, if one of my kids isn't playing on that team, or Tennessee is not somehow trying to get into the tournament, or I guess North Carolina, because I still root for them too. There's nothing anybody could do to make me care about that game. And so it's meaningless entirely for me. And it's like Caitlyn Jenner. I don't care if Caitlyn Jenner wants to tell me what what he self-identifies as. I don't care. I know what Caitlyn Jenner is. The NCAA tournament can tell me they've expanded the field to 700 teams, and I don't care. Self-identify as whatever you want. I know what the tournament is, and I just can't care. So they're meaningless in my heart, Mac. That's where I'm coming from.
I mean, obviously you are entitled to feeling about the games however you want to feel about them. At the end of the day, here's my argument, listener, is that these games, determined by the powers that be, even though I hate them on every level, probably not as much as Jeff, but I do hate them, and I think that they're corrupt. The NCAA has determined that these games count towards your tournament record. So these games are tournament games when it comes to Did we win a tournament game? Yes or no? They count. What this is equal to, what this is equivalent for the listener who may not know, or Joe, you may not know, these first 4 games are similar to what we would call the wild card in MLB or the NFL. So these games technically aren't in the bracket because the bracket is dependent upon these games, the outcome of them. But just like in MLB, there's 4 teams that are in the bracket. The 4th team is the winner of the wild card game. So there's 5 teams that make the postseason, but only 4 teams are in the postseason bracket. It's the same idea. So we have these play-in games, if you want to call them that, although the NCAA does say these count towards your tournament record. So these play-in games or wild card games or however you want to refer to them, these first 4 games do matter because they determine which team fills that last spot in the bracket. So they are a playoff game. They are a postseason game. They do matter because if you lose them, your season's over. They are meaningful. And they're meaningful, obviously, tonight for us, or for me at least, because whoever wins this game plays Tennessee. So I am interested in seeing what do these teams look like. And to your point, Jeff, no, I don't. I feel confident Tennessee's going to be either team. So no, I'm not going to say one team winning or one team losing moves the needle a ton for me. But I am interested. It is meaningful because a team season is riding on this game. It matters.
There's no subtext here. I'm just curious.
Mm-hmm.
What round of the tournament is this game?
First round.
And so the field of 64 is considered round 2 now?
It's just the way they've termed it is this is the beginning of the first round. So the first round is the first round, which also includes the round of 64. Another way to think of it that I've kind of thought through as I've been thinking about this, trying to explain, like if I was going to explain this to, maybe someone who doesn't watch a ton of basketball, is think about how like week 1 in football works, right? So we have games that are played the week before week 1. They count towards your regular season record, but they're not a part of the traditional week 1 setup. This is the same thing. You're playing a couple days before the tournament, but they're still tournament games. They're just happening prior to the round of 64.
The difference is, though, they won't have an extra win on their total in the NFL scenario. In the NFL scenario.
Well, no, I mean the wins still count.
It's just week 1 stretched over a long period of time.
No.
So when Tennessee comes to their round 1 game, they're going to be playing a team that completed round 1 also. And so, I just can't care about the NCAA schizophrenic attempt to do stuff that's contradictory. It's round 1, or it's round 2, or it's round 0, or there's 2 round 1s. And you get what I'm saying? I'm not trying to argue with you. All the facts are on your side, dude. But this is just a mess. It's just a stupid mess. Like all that the NCAA touches, it's a stupid mess. And so, I mean, even acknowledging that you're right, that the facts are on your side, they can't even articulate how this relates to the other round 1 in a way that's rational. I just can't get there. I can't get there because they can't get there.
And I don't disagree. I preferred the tournament when it was a true 64 teams, 1 through 16, 4 times. I preferred it that way. The play-in games, I don't like from an objective, like how would I set up the tournament if I could. But I also don't like the round. I don't like 64 teams in it at all anyways. I would rather the tournament be a little bit smaller because that would allow you, I think, to better determine who actually the best team is. But that's a different argument. My point is, or what I'm trying to clarify here is that in the terms that they've set up, whether I like them or not, these games do matter. And for the players playing in them, for the teams playing in them, for the people who are expecting to play one of these teams next round, they all matter because their season's on the line.
Well, and good for the Caitlin 4. I mean, whatever. More power to them. I just can't bring myself to care or consider them meaningful. I just can't. And so all I'm really arguing for is my own bedrock conclusion that this is silly, inconsistent nonsense that the NCAA has managed to screw up the one thing they seem to care about, which is their basketball tournament.
Sure. Joe, so you've gotten to listen to us kind of talk about it. What would you say? How would you answer this question? Are the first 4 games meaningful? What would you say?
Well, I think that it would be more, logical, honest, and more, direct to just call these play-in games, right? They're not part of the tournament. We've got our bracket set up to X, but we've got Y slots we still need to fill, and the committee just when you get that deep into 64 teams, right? When this is, I think, kind of what you were saying, where if you could Thanos snap and change the tournament, you would shrink it down because it gets hard to determine who's 64 and who's 65. Right. So if you're going to choose to kind of have a mini, sudden death tournament between the potential teams that are on the outside looking in, and let them play their way in, have like a little mini tournament, and then do the the big tournament, that at least makes sense to me. And like Jeff said, I also would not care, because you're talking about teams that are so far deep into the bracket that nobody's going to, unless you're pulling for those teams or have kids on those teams or whatever, then or you just
love basketball,
right? Or you just really, 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 really love college basketball and you're watching every game. You're going to turn it in, and that's, I guess, for me. I know this is not really the heart of your question, but I refuse to pretend to be stupid about what this is, which is how can we get more views, more games, more money, drum up more hype, get more drama, right? Like that's, and frankly, I'm looking at the NCAA tournament. I like the NCAA tournament. I like that it's called March Madness and that it kind of operates this way. But I'm looking at March Madness, and then I'm looking over at the college football playoff, and I'm thinking, if they do this to college football, they're going to lose me, right? Like, and I'm not saying that they would go to a 64 team college football playoff, but that this kind of thing works for basketball. But this idea of, trying to drum up all this drama over these games that are really, for me, meaningless is I refuse to pretend to be stupid about what they're doing or why they're doing it. And frankly, I would rather they just pick the 64 teams. I mean, you picked 1 through 60. How many playing games are there? 2?
There's 4. So there's
4.
There's 60. The tournament is defined as 68 teams, which include the 4 teams that are going to lose the first 4 games. Right. Yeah. So it's a 68 team tournament, but only 64 teams really play in the round of 64.
Right. So they've already picked 1 through 68. I understand. 1 through 60. 1 through 60. They pick 1 through 60. 1 through 60 are selected and slotted. Correct. They should pick 4 more teams. This is ridiculous. Yeah. I think the whole thing is stupid.
So Joe, you're kind of the biggest NFL football fan in our group here. So do you also apply that logic to the wild card? Because the wild card is the same thing. So do you think they should say, okay? It's not exactly the same thing. Because the wild card round is, we're taking 2 teams that didn't win their division, right? They didn't earn the playoff spot. They're just the next 2 teams at large, and we're allowing them to play in to the divisional round of the tournament. That's what the NFL is. That's the same thing the MLB is, and that's what this is. It's the same thing.
I don't think that it's the same thing at all, because the NFL, one, it's a much smaller pool of talent, and so you have with the smaller pool of talent, the 4 divisional winners would give you 2 teams with a bye and then 2 playoff games. The wild card weekend adds an additional playoff game
for more money, for more views, for more all the things you said.
That's fine, but I guess this is going back. It always comes back to this argument, I guess, but the wild card winner can win the Super Bowl. Is Miami of Ohio going to win the tournament?
No, probably not. But
probably not.
But they are playing for an 11 seed, and we've seen as low as, I think the lowest to ever win was a 9 in UConn. Maybe that was the Kimball Walker team.
And this is the thing where I actually think it's apples and oranges, because something like that can happen in basketball in a way that I actually am not entirely sure is possible in football. So,
sure. In the same way, we shouldn't be letting group of 5 teams into a 12-team playoff, because
right. So that would go back to that argument and be on your side. But I don't see them as the same, because the wild card weekend is the first round of the playoff. You're not going to play the wild card and then play another team in round 1 of the playoff. Those teams are on a bye.
That's not how the NFL brands it. You're right. But by practical application, we could say this is the second round, because we've already had 1 round of games being played in the postseason.
Sure, but you could do that with everything. Heck, you could do that with everything leading up to the national championship of any sport.
You could. That's just
Then
the NFL's chose to prepackage it.
What the heck are we talking about? No,
we're talking about the rules the NCAA has set out compared to the way the rules the NFL set out. It's just how they've packaged the thing that they're presenting to you.
So you think that it would be better in keeping with what you're calling the NFL model, that these playing games should be round one of the playoff, the NCAA tournament, and that we should say all 60 teams that are currently selected and not playing a playing game have a first round bye?
I'm going to jump in and say that would at least be intellectually consistent.
Right. That
would be intellectually consistent. Right. I agree with that. Or if you call the equivalent, Joe, would be like you just say, instead of calling the first four, we call them the wild card.
Or the Caitlin
it's the same. It's the same idea.
Call them DERF if you want to. What you call them doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Sure.
But giving them a first round bye instead of saying this is the beginning of round one and then they're going to play another team in round one, that makes no sense at all. And I don't know what we're doing that for, except to just try to create more games.
Yeah.
I don't think that it's a 1-to-1 correlation and that the wild card of the NFL is the same thing, because the wild card, the teams that get the bye in wild card weekend have earned the bye based on being the top seeded team in their conference, right? So there's a legitimate measurable standard to getting a bye. But what we're saying is legitimately Tennessee has a bye. That's what we're saying.
Except they don't, because they play them in round one.
But the team that we're going to play hasn't been determined yet because they're playing in the wild card. And I guess my question would be, why does Tennessee have a bye? What did we do to earn a bye? What did every team 1 through 60 do to earn a bye? And if you can't objectively tell me what they did to earn a bye, then it's not the same. That would be my rebuttal.
Sure. Yeah, I see these things as, obviously, I agree that it's different in a sense because there are so many more teams. It's a different sport. That's kind of what I said at the beginning in terms of the college football playoff. That's the same argument I made. So I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying now. My only thing is I do think these games matter. I think they are meaningful, especially if you like college basketball, because a team's season will either continue or end because of the results of these games. So I'm
going to throw a little bit of a check there, because you and I are not afraid to lose our tempers and argue with each other. But you've a couple times returned to this if you like college basketball. And I think I can legitimately claim that I really like college basketball.
Yeah, I think so too.
I don't care at all about these games.
That's why this discussion started, because that blew me away.
I think by their nature, these games tell you, don't care about this. It's meaningless. So, I like college basketball. I don't watch every college basketball game. I'm sure there are people out there who try to do a whole lot more than me. I'm not saying I'm the most. I think the nature of these games, the irrational way that they're presented to us in relationship to the rest of the tournament, I think they tell you, if you're a thinking person, don't care about these. I get watching them because you just really enjoy seeing the sport played out. I turn on high school basketball games that I have no relationship to every now and then if I just happen to catch one, because I like watching basketball. But sure. I just don't go to the if you like college basketball. I think if you like college basketball, in a very real sense, these games are designed to offend you because of the nature of how ridiculous their construction is. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
Well, so I think the NFL comparison is really not helpful in a lot of ways because I think the sports are just so different. But I actually think, Mac, that you're wrong to compare this to the wild card. What this feels like to me is when you're in a situation, which happens more often than one might expect in the National Football League. But again, it's because you only have 32 teams rather than, just 16 on each conference rather than, 190 or whatever is in the NCAA. And so, what this is like to me is not the wild card. This is the situation where the team gets to the last game of the regular season, and if they win, they're in. And if they lose, they're out. Is that game meaningful? Well, sure, it's meaningful to those people, but it has absolutely no bearing on the bracket of the playoffs.
Well, it does have a bearing on the bracket because it determines which team is in it.
Yeah, sure. In that sense, it does. But like, I'm not watching it as a playoff game. For those people, for the people who are in it, it's a playoff game for them. It's the first playoff game for them because if you win, you're in. If you lose, you're out. And that happens a lot in the NFL. A lot more than people might expect anyway. So for them, it's a playoff game. But what I'm saying is, as a casual viewer of football, if it's the Steelers, of course I'm going to watch that football game because I'm a Steelers fan. But if it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, I don't turn it on and go, well, I'm a big fan of the NFL, and this is the first week of the playoffs because it's a playoff game for them, so I'm going to watch this football game. I don't do that. That's what these games are. It's winning you're in, losing you go home, but it's not the playoffs yet. It's not the bracket yet. I would not care. I don't care. As a casual fan, I don't look at these and say, the NCAA tournament has begun. It hasn't begun yet. We don't even know who's in.
Last question I'll ask specifically to you, Joe, because I think you guys have done a good job arguing kind of your side of the discussion. Last question I ask, let's just say, in the scenario you've painted out, the last regular season game, winning you're in, losing you're out of the playoffs. Let's say the NFL decided, they made up this rule, that if teams get into that situation, we are going to give them on their franchise record a playoff win for that game, and we're going to give the team that loses a playoff loss for that game, even though, like you said, it's not technically the playoffs yet. We're going to determine by rule of how we give this team a record throughout their franchise history. If they said we're counting this as a playoff game, do you think that would you then say, well, that's a playoff game? The NFL said this is a playoff game. It's going to the record.
No,
or are you still?
I'd stage a nutty because it's the last week of the regular season, and a bunch of people are playing games that are part of the regular season and go on the regular season record, but aren't playoff games.
Totally. I don't disagree with you. So your issue then again was with the rule itself, not with this. Like, that's the difference is the NCAA has said right, wrong, or indifferent, which I agree with you guys. I don't like it. But the NCAA has said this counts towards your postseason. This is a postseason game. The NFL hasn't done that. But if the NFL did do that, you would have to face the reality of, well, the NFL is saying this is a playoff game. So I have to honor, if the Steelers are in this situation, it counts the playoff game. It's a playoff game.
Well, that's not the only alternative.
Sorry.
The other alternative is to point out how stupid the NFL would be.
Yeah, right. And I don't disagree with that at all. But that was aside from that. Again, I don't agree with the rule. I'm just saying this is what the rule says, and therefore.
But then you've reduced the entire conversation. Then what you've reduced it to is: do we understand what these games are in light of what the NCAA has said? The answer to that question is yeah, we get it.
Which is what led with Mac is Mac's right. Correct. I'm just right.
That's not a conversation.
Right. You're correct. We're right.
You're asking me if I understand the rules. Like, yeah, I know. I understand the rules.
And so if the rules say, okay, and stupid it may be, the games are objectively meaningful because the powers that be have said that they are. And we're faced to either accept that or to rebel against that and say, well, I'm going to refuse to accept that, which is totally within both of your rights to do. It's just at the end of the day, they're still meaningful.
Well, okay, let me ask you this, Mac. And I really have been trying to stay out because, like, I'll save actually arguing with you for when we actually have something to argue about of significance. If the NCAA decides that the winner of the NCAA women's basketball tournament gets to count that as a victory in the men's tournament,
sure,
are you going to be like, oh yeah, that's definitely a victory for them in the men's tournament? Or will you be like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life?
Yeah, I would say that it's dumb.
Yeah, so like that's where we're at. We're in that common ground. We're just on different sides of whatever the boundary is. I don't feel beholden to the NCAA stupidity. And if they decide to do something even more stupid, I'll just feel just as free to be like, that's not real. That's fake.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. No, I prefer the tournament to be a true 64 team. We don't do the first four games because growing up we didn't have the first four games. This is a relatively new, maybe the last 10 years. I don't remember exactly when it started. This is a newer thing that they've done to let four more teams in, right? It's a participation trophy of sorts because we get to say, well, these extra teams get to play in this tournament. They really ultimately, at the end of the day, don't have any business being in. I'm not trying to say like told you so or anything like that. But to me, this is the same kind of thing that we talked about in the fall when we talked about group of 5 teams. I don't think that James Madison has any business being in the playoffs. And so I apply the same logic to both. And I say, yeah, I agree with you guys. But at the end of the day, that James Madison game against Oregon counted as a playoff game. So I watched it. I participated in viewing it because I care about the playoffs, and that's part of the playoffs, even though I don't think that it should be.
But the difference
also be the same. Just real fast, that would also be the same kind of thing if the NCAA decides the women's champion gets a men's bracket victory. It's all of a piece, and so you kind of have to sign up for all of it. Whatever lunacy they bring to the table in the future, you're just kind of pre-committed to. And
or you have to draw the line somewhere, right? Which is what you said. Or maybe our lines are in a different spot, but yeah.
And at least, every time we talk, I become more and more persuaded to your position concerning the college football playoff. And I actually think where I'm at is that they just should be totally separate. Now, I don't know if people in this podcast would agree with me, but I think totally separate means they're not on your regular season schedule either.
Yeah, I see a difference there, but yeah.
I think that's the height of insanity to be like, well, we're going to play them in the regular season, but they don't have a chance at our national title. I can't even think of another time where that's true, where that would be true in any other sport.
We are layering all inside baseball here at Volatile Podcast.
But anyway, this is a different conversation. So, but the thing is, like with basketball, again, because it's just apples and oranges, they're just different sports. Right. I actually think an SMU or Miami of Ohio, those are the 2 teams that are playing right now that are trying to win their way to play us. It would be a massive Cinderella story. But in basketball, could one of those teams go on a 5 or 6? How many is it? 5 rounds? 5, 6 rounds? How many did we play?
It depends on if this is 16. Round 1 or not.
Right. So 64, 32, 16, 8, 4, 2. Yeah. So 6 games, right? You got to win 6 games, right? Am I doing the math right there?
Something like that, sure. Yeah.
So they got to win 6 games. Could SMU or Miami of Ohio go on a 6-game run and win the tournament?
Yeah, it's unlikely.
I think it's unlikely, but it's more likely than James Madison beating who did they play? Ole Miss?
Oregon. Yeah.
Oregon, right? So it's which of those things is more likely? I'd probably if I were betting man, sometimes I am. I would go on Miami of Ohio over James Madison. So
yeah, me too.
So anyway, I say all that to say, but at least with the college football thing, the reason why I brought it up is because there is an objective standard. What is the current ruling that gets them that spot? They're a conference champion, and they're the highest ranked within the rankings for the college football playoff committee. There's objective standards now. Again, I'm becoming increasingly every day more and more persuaded that they don't belong. But at least there's a standard. At least there's something that I can point to say, well, this is why they're here. What do these guys? What's their standard? Right? They're just again, maybe there is one that I just don't know. But it seems to me like we basically got to that 60 to 68 range of teams, and we were like, well, we don't know who to pick, so let them play for it. Like that's what it feels like to me, which is I don't know how to get up and care about that either. So
the abiding lesson is that the NCAA can't manage anything. They have a golden goose in a basketball tournament, and they can't manage anything. I mean, them or Congress. I don't mean to be political, but like, who's the most incompetent body in American society? It's 1A and 1B is Congress and an NCAA, and I don't know which one to pick.
Yeah, and they're both counting on each other to fix their problems. Let's move on.
Absolutely. Well, good discussion, guys. I appreciate y'all getting into the weeds with me on that. Let's go ahead and move on to baseball.
Oh, good. That's a much better topic.
So the Vols lose their weekend series this past weekend to Georgia. Tennessee won on Friday night, 7-4, and they dropped the next 2 on Saturday. We lost 2-4, and then on Sunday the Vols lose a heartbreaker, 7-8. So let's just rather than jumping into specific game by game, which we can do, some of us, somebody has some specific notes. But what were your overall weekend takeaways from this weekend? Joel, you go ahead and go first, bud.
Well, I guess here's my general from a 30,000 foot view takeaway. We lost the series, which I wasn't able to be on the podcast before the series happened, but I thought we were going to lose the series. Mm-hmm. But what's, again, just classic Vols. We didn't lose it in any way, shape, or form the way I thought we were going to lose it, which made it that much more tough to watch. So I thought we were going to lose these games because we weren't going to score any runs. We actually ended up scoring in the 2 games that we had a real good chance to win. Well, really, we had a chance to win all 3.
Yep.
But in 2 of the 3, the one we won and then the one we lost in a heartbreaker, the Bats, were doing enough. They were getting production, and we couldn't bury them with good pitching. I want to get into some particulars of that as we break down the specific games. But from a 30,000-foot view, it's tough for me because the end result is what I expected, but not how I expected, which makes it worse. That's where I'm at.
You guys know much more about the sport than I do. And in fairness, I was only able to dip into the second and third games. I watched the first one and then saw bits and pieces of the other 2. Here's what my takeaway is, and this is maybe higher than 30,000. Tennessee's in a rebuilding year. When Helander was hired, there was all this language of keeping it rolling. We're just keeping it rolling. What I heard from the Vols podcasts this weekend was, hey, this team got better even though they lost the series.
Yeah.
So what I now realize is that Tennessee is in a rebuilding year. There's not a keep it rolling with Elander. He's probably going to be a fine coach. He's probably going to be maybe even a really good coach or a great coach. Who knows? That's not off the table. But this idea that we were just picking up where we left off is dead and buried. And I just, since I've been talking about everything I've already said before in previous podcasts, I just kind of freshly hate Danny White again. So Tennessee is in a rebuilding year, and that's different than what was sold at the time the coach was hired. And we're learning that now. So, okay, let's see what they can attain in year 1 as they build toward whatever they might get to be sometime in the future. That's my takeaway.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily disagree with the language that you're using there as far as it being a rebuilding year. I guess, and I know you're not saying this, but this has been talked about across, just people that watch college baseball, Vols fans specifically, that, Elander's not doing as well with this team. And I think that's probably maybe true in some parts, but I don't believe that we would be necessarily better than we are even if Tony was still the coach. I think there may be still aspects of this team's issues that would be there either way. I think there's aspects of this team's issues that might be slightly not as big of an issue if Tony was still here. But at the end of the day, to your point, Jeff, I think that this team kind of is so far is who they would have been regardless of who the coach is. I do think there's some things that Elander has done that Tony might have done differently, but you just can't know that for sure, of course. And, going back to, this is year 1 of Elander. And so I'll kind of touch on the first big kind of issue that we all have. I know Joe has this issue. The way that, Elander managed the bullpen this weekend was questionable at best. And so, I wonder, does Tony manage the bullpen slightly better? Maybe, just not for sure. And, early in Tony's career, he had some bullpen faux pas where he mismanaged it as well. So I think that's part of learning to be a new coach. So that kind of points to maybe Tony would have done it better, but I just don't know that for sure. Jeff, what's up?
I'm just going to ask with, I forgot his name, Frank
Anderson.
Yeah, Frank Anderson. Do you think that losing Tony and Frank Anderson means that they wouldn't have a better output from this team than Josh Elander and the rest of his staff do?
Yeah, it's hard for me to say no. Like you have so much trust in Tony and Frank and what they built, and so I think that they would have handled this weekend specifically a little bit better from the pitching perspective. But I just know, like, there were times where they didn't handle it well, and I saw that firsthand, and that was frustrating. But I guess what I'm trying to say is the distinction I'm trying to make here is I think that Tony and Frank's experience actually being the one to pull the strings and make the decisions in the heat of the moment, I think that's what's the difference is, and not like baseball philosophy or quality of strategy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but doesn't that mean, and I'm really not trying to nail you because you know the sport better than I do, but doesn't that mean Tony and Frank would have gotten a better, like you said earlier, you weren't sure that Tony could have gotten a better team than what we've got right now. Doesn't it seem like maybe you do think that?
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say there when I say I think that I think obviously the players that are on this team under Elander are the same players Tony would have had. So whatever the individual player is struggling with would have still been a struggle for them. It's just, would Tony have been able to push the right buttons and manage them slightly differently to get more or better play out of them? I'd like to believe so. Again, because of the experience factor, because Tony has done that in the middle of a game, in the middle of a series many times before. I'd like to think, and I think that he did grow in making those decisions in the middle of a game. I just think that's part of what you have as with a new coach, that he's still learning how to do that with these guys. And so I guess to get right to your question, Jeff, ultimately, gun to my head, yes, I think that Tony would have gotten slightly different results out of all the different players and situations they've been in so far. So would the outcomes be different? It's definitely possible. I just also know that these players are still these players, and these are the players he would have had. It's not like it's a different team because Tony left. It's not like we had 10 players go in the transfer portal. This is the team. So I'm also like, well, maybe these guys would have just struggled either way. I just don't know for sure. But ultimately, if I had to choose, I do think Tony could have gotten slightly different results.
Cool. I appreciate the answer.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe, did you have more to say about that, or are you good to keep going?
I think that the series loss is ultimately a coaching failure. I think it's on Elander. I think I'm a big proponent of numbers, right, and statistics, and like those things matter.
I'm anti-numbers for the record. I don't like them.
So
when y'all were trying to count NCAA rounds, I was like, no, I hate numbers.
I think so. I think those things matter, but the guy who's managing the team also has to, you have to manage the players in the moment, right? The moments matter, and and baseball, the love of baseball is the moments, right? It's bottom of the ninth and 2 outs and a tie game, and left-handed dealer, right-handed batter, the pitch, right? Like baseball is built on moments. You have to be able to coach in the moment. And so for me, when I'm looking at the overall series, it's hard for me. I'm trying to do the Mac Williams thing here, which is if my expectation was that they were going to lose the series and they actually played better than I thought they would, how should I feel about the series?
Right.
And realistically, there should be something in me that is super positive. But the thing is, they had a chance to win the series. They had a chance to steal it, and they should have. And they didn't because they went with Krenzel, who was clearly struggling and didn't pull him. And some of this, so let me set that up. The reason why I brought the moments, when he came out, I'm like 97% sure. Listener, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But when Krenzel was warming up, when they went to the bullpen, it was raining. It was a tough environment to pitch the ball in. True for both teams. You got to figure it out. And so he's warming up on the mound, and he was throwing it to the backstop. Right now, he came in an intense situation, and he kind of did what he needed to do to limit the damage and get out of that inning. You got what you needed out of him, right? But he was clearly not comfortable. He wasn't comfortable from the moment he took the mound. And you got to see that, you got to know that, and you got to when he starts to get rocked, you got to go to the bullpen. Now, what I'll grant Elander and the coaching staff is that there is some philosophical approaches here that people can differ on. And that I think you can kind of run both. You could be on one side or the other and still be a winning baseball team, but I land on a particular side. So when you're managing a bullpen, right, you're not just thinking about the inning you're in. You have to think about the innings that are coming up and how you're going to manage the arms that you have in relief. You can't be so focused on the moment that you sacrifice the win later. But my issue with coaching baseball in general is that I think managers get too focused on the innings to come, and they would rather lose the game in the 7th than potentially lose it in the 9th. And to me, that is bass-ackwards coaching. I don't understand it at all. That if you can, you have to do what you need to do in the 7th to maintain your lead and pour on pressure. That's how you win baseball games in late when you're in a dogfight late, especially when you're playing a team that hits well, which is what Georgia does really well. They hit well.
Mm-hmm.
You got to keep the lead. You got to put the pressure on. You got to get them to chase balls. That's how you win that baseball game. And so what I think he did was he potentially lost the game in the 7th because he thought, well, if I could scrape by, I'll definitely be able to close it out in the 9th. And I think that is philosophically wrong. And the reason why I'm granting that is a philosophical approach is there are plenty of major league teams that run their programs that way and that are very successful. So I own that it's a philosophical approach that can be successful. I just don't agree with it at all. I think that's what excuse me. I think that's what we saw on Sunday, and I think ultimately that's why we lost the game.
Well, what you just said, Joe, kind of brought up this thought to me is given the circumstances around what happened in Game 3 with Krenzel, it feels like Elander did the quote right thing in terms of generic baseball philosophy, which is I've got to get to a certain point in pitch count and innings in whatever's left of the game, so I can put in my closer, for lack of a better word, which is Bo Rudy, generally speaking. I've got to get Krenzel to a certain point so I can best use Rudy, which, to what you're saying, can be a successful strategy. And I agree that it can be. And I think that Elander was thinking about this from a general baseball philosophy perspective. I think he was thinking about it in a way that makes sense. The issue is, and I agree with you, is that you have to think about what your team is good at. What are the strengths and weaknesses of my team? In Elander's case, so far this year, we know that Tennessee has struggled to get hits when you need them when runners in scoring position. So if I was in Elander's shoes at the point that I see Krenzel struggling, we've got a little bit of a lead here, I would have started to think these might be the only runs that we're going to walk away with. What do I do to prevent them from getting the lead, tying, anything like that? I have to preserve this amount of runs because this might be all we get. Yeah. And in you brought up Major League Baseball, and it's even more so true in college baseball. Runs are generally speaking at a premium. Like most great teams can get runs when you need them. And so stretching a guy in the middle to late innings is not the end of the world, because you can usually bank on, especially Tennessee teams in the past, we're going to score a run, 2, 3, 4, maybe more in the last couple innings, as the other team is also dipping into their bullpen more, throwing different guys more. And so I can bank on maybe stretching this guy here, and he looks great and we get by, great. Or maybe he doesn't and he gives up a couple runs and we give up the lead, or we go into the 8th with a tie. Fine, I'm going to score some runs. The problem with this specific game, with this specific series, is I think Elander was thinking like a baseball coach and not like Tennessee's baseball coach, right? Yep. So he was thinking about this like, oh, this is a good baseball strategy. And generally speaking, it is. The problem is this team has not shown they can score runs when you need them, so you couldn't bank on the fact that we were going to score more.
Yeah, I think it's really well said.
So, yeah, for Game 3, if you didn't watch, and Jeff, I'm assuming since you watched bits and pieces, you at least saw how it ended, whether that was after the fact on Twitter or whatnot. So the last kind of top half of the 9th, what happened for the listeners that maybe weren't paying attention or maybe missed it, is that Tennessee at this point had scored some runs to battle back, and so we were down 1, 8-7 in the top of the 9th. We got 2 outs. Levi Clark hits a single, which, again, going back to some positives, across the board, Tennessee hit the ball better than I expected and better than they have up until this point. So I do think that's a positive takeaway. Tennessee did hit the ball better.
And Levi Clark hitting with 2 outs. I mean, right. A lot of 2-out rallies.
Right. Levi Clark gets a 2-out hit. Elander pinch hits Stone Lawless. And so Stone comes up, 2 outs, Levi Clark's on base. And Stone Clark hits a tank, really. I mean, it was a bomb. Like, off the bat, you're like, this is definitely gone. And Stone Lawless also thought so as well. And unfortunately, just baseball, the defender made a great play, and he robbed the home run, and the series is over, and you lose. I want to talk about – this has kind of been making its rounds on Vol Twitter. What are your guys' thoughts on Stone Lawless's reaction? I don't know if you've seen this. I'm sure you probably have, but he hits that ball and he kind of, jump immediately. He's into celebration, spikes his bat. getting hype, whatever. A lot of people are kind of being hard on Stone for that reaction, especially given the result. What were your thoughts about that? Did you hate that type of, jumping the gun on the celebration? Did you like the fire and intensity? Where do you fall on that argument?
It sucks, but that's, like you said, that's baseball. You got robbed. It was clearly over the fence. It'd be different if he tanked one, but it was caught on the warning track. I think then you deserve all the flack that he's getting. But it was out, right? I mean, he hit a home run that the defender just made a really great play on. And, people don't even appreciate, a lot of casual baseball fans don't even appreciate how much even something like the weather can affect, is that ball stealable or not, right? Like, can you actually rob that home run? Like the ambient temperature of the stadium, the atmospheric pressure, like these things,
the wind direction. Yeah. There's so many things.
There's so many little things that's like that you can't tell when you smack it, right? When you smack it, that thing's out. But how far is it out? That's something that could change mid-flight. A lot of people don't appreciate that kind of thing. I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, it's a brutal, absolutely brutal look in the mirror when you think you just hit the go-ahead run that's going to force the home half of the ninth, and it gets robbed from you. But that's baseball. That happens. I didn't hate it.
Yeah.
I have no criticisms. That's something I've loved about Tennessee baseball. And look, if you do hate it, if you do think it needs to be dried up or whatever, there's literally nothing more you could do to that kid than that experience, right? He's the one who's got to live through all that. And so I don't know that it'll change Stone, but like there's no talking head. There's no chew out from a coach. There's no chew out from your mom and dad. The embarrassment of that after he gets robbed is the most that anybody could do to correct that behavior if you don't like it. So, yeah, I love it in Tennessee baseball. I hope they keep doing it. And I just feel bad for the kid because he made a really good play. He just ran up against a guy who made a little bit better play. And I don't blame him on the side he was in control of and was aware of. Right. Celebrating what was really great.
Yeah, no, I agree, Jeff, wholeheartedly. I mean, to me, when I saw, and there was obviously of course, it was more other teams fans, right? Arkansas fans, Georgia fans, people that obviously hate Tennessee and baseball, or had a dog in the fight, pun intended. It was those people who, were really taking their shots at Stone. There were some Tennessee fans that I saw, but to me, it's like, this is what we've signed up for. This is what Tony's built. Like, we are going to be in your face. We're going to be celebrating. We're going to be getting after it. We're going to be flipping bats, spiking bats, yelling at the other team's dugout. Like, that's who we are. And sometimes it's going to blow up in your face. You're going to look like an idiot. But as a player, I was never that type of player. I never was like, I'm going to beat you and rub your nose in it. That just wasn't who I was as a player. But I have no problem with if that's the culture of our team, us doing that. But what I don't want to see, frankly, Jeff, to what you kind of pointed out, I don't want to see that sort of fire and tenacity change, because to me, that just shows that it was all just kind of a show anyways at the beginning. Like, if you drill a ball and it's gone, or you think it's gone, or celebrate it. Act like you're going to act
in a huge moment.
Yeah, be you. Do what we do. And because at the end of the day, like you said, the kid just made a great play. And it sucks that it had to end that way, but you killed the ball. You got every bit of it. And to your point, Joe, if it was a sunny 75-degree day, that ball's probably not even close to being robbed. But correct. It wasn't. And so, you just got to live with the consequences of it. And I hope that Tennessee doesn't let that beat them coming into this weekend where we play Missouri in another SEC game. I hope that we, continue being who we are and don't let this, minor setback, because that really is all it is, right? We expected to lose this series. Nick thought we'd get swept. We won a game on Friday night, just like I said. We lost the next two. And, it is what it is. I think there's some positives to take away from it. I think there's obviously some glaring things where you're like, Elander's got to do a better job managing the bullpen. But all in all, I left the weekend feeling like it sucks to lose the way he lost. It sucks for Stone to have to deal with the repercussions of how he acted. But at the end of the day, we are who we are, and I'm okay with, if we're gonna lose in dramatic fashion like that, I'm okay with having to deal with the backlash of our tenacity and our fire and swagger, whatever you want to call it. I'm happy to live with the consequences of that.
Yeah, and I hope that's Elander's message to the guys, right? Rally around, the camaraderie and the brotherhood of players, right? We're not going to beat up on our own, and we're not gonna take any flack from anybody, and we're going to keep playing our game. We're going to keep being who we are. This is our identity, and build on what you just said, Mac. I think there are a lot of positives to take away from the weekend. The frustrating thing for me, what we already led with, is I think you coached yourself out of a series win here, which is brutal and kind of unforgivable in a sense, right? But if we put that aside, the bats were much more active, especially in key moments. I thought the two out tenacity was something that had been sorely lacking, and 2 out rallies will kill you if you let them happen to you, and will absolutely demolish your opponents if you can get them going. And Tennessee was able to do that pretty consistently throughout the weekend. They scored a lot of runs. The pitching was, here and there. But
I would like to interject there and say that the bullpen pitching was here or there. The starting pitching I thought was very good.
Yeah, I thought starting pitching was great. The bullpen is still shaky. If the listener remembers, very early on in our podcast, I was very excited about our young freshman bullpen, and that excitement has very much expired. But if they can continue to improve and get better, there's still a lot of season left in front of us, and there's a lot of good things that can still be achieved this season. I'm not down on the Vols baseball team. Except to say you cannot coach yourself out of series wins. You can't do that. When the guys are fighting and they're putting themselves in a position to win baseball games, you got to do everything you can to help them out. I don't think we did that this weekend.
Yeah. And one last thing I'll say that we haven't said yet, that's why I'm going to bring it up, is, I think that this weekend stings a lot and maybe makes you feel negatively because of Saturday, which we haven't talked about a ton. Saturday, Georgia only scored 4 runs. Tennessee lost 4-2. Saturday, you had opportunities with runners in scoring position to go ahead and just win game 2 and win the series and end it right there. And let's play for Sunday. Let's try and get a sweep, but no pressure, whatever. And I felt like Saturday was the day where the hitters have to learn from and grow, because in the SEC, it's just tough to leave games up to the rubber match, especially when, Nick and I talked about on the podcast without you guys, how Tennessee's not performed well on Sundays. If you know that as a team, we've got to get the bats going on Saturday and go ahead and close this series, because not Blanco. Who is our Saturday starter? Goodness gracious. I am blanking right now. Blanco Sunday, Coons is Friday. Who is Saturday? I can see his face. Anyways, he had a great outing. He gave up a lot of hits on Saturday, but as far as runs go, he gave it the same amount as Teagan did. So you got a great outing, but you just could not get the runs when you needed them. And in an SEC play, you got to go get those wins when they're there. And so I guess that's the biggest takeaway hitting wise. The hitting was great, better than expected, but like Saturday, we've got to do better. We've got to take advantage of a good pitching outing, knowing that Sunday could be a bullpen problem, as it was. And if you've already got the first 2 wins, it just puts a lot less pressure on you on Sunday.
Yeah.
Same take.
Blanco, I think, started Saturday.
Blanco's Sunday. I'm very confident. Coons is Friday. Blanco's Sunday. I just can't remember who Saturday is.
Okay. But again, I don't want to just go round and round here, but I think you're right about what you said as far as game 2 is concerned, especially with our track record on Sunday. But you gotta love how the guys came out on Sunday and put up 5 so quickly, right? Like they just responded. And I think that matters, right? Like the bats failed you on Saturday. You got to think that the coaching staff was like, guys, we got to hit when we have opportunities to hit. And they jumped all over Georgia in Sunday's game. I mean, they just responded so well. And to not be able to walk away Sunday with a win, again, especially because I think ultimately it was a coaching failure, is brutal. You cannot allow that to happen as you continue down the season. You gotta put the whole thing together to get series wins. A white pill for all of us is that baseball anybody can win on any given day. We know that it's more like basketball in that sense that good teams can lose to bad teams. Bad teams can, they can jump one on you. And I'll just remind you all that the University of Texas was upset by Tarleton State. Am I saying that right?
Yes.
Tarleton
Prairie Dog State. Yeah.
Is that right? I don't even know who those.
It's Landon Mack. Landon Mack is your Saturday starter. I finally got it.
Okay. Landon is the Saturday starter. So Texas, number 2 team in the country, upset 6-1 yesterday. And so, anybody can win on any given day. So you just got to figure out how to put it all together and get those runs, get those outs, do the thing.
Yep. Another good thing is, so Tennessee did win their midweek game last night against Eastern Kentucky, which obviously you should always win your midweek games, but they can be weird sometimes. I was glad, Tennessee scored 10 runs. They won that game 10-3. I was glad to see we didn't let Sunday's loss affect us mentally on Tuesday. Took care of business. That game was pretty much in control from the beginning. So good win. The Vols have Missouri coming to Knoxville this weekend for our first home series, SEC series of the season. Guys, Missouri is not as good of a team as we are. That's a series that Tennessee should win on paper. What do you think is going to happen, Jeff? Or Joe? Why don't you go ahead and give your first prediction there?
I think. Okay, so based on the fact that it seems like all systems are go, and like you said, the midweek game went as expected. Right, which is that you beat up on a bad team and you took care of business. I think the guys coming back home to Knoxville will be geared up to win. I think they win the series. I don't know if I'd call it sweep, but I think we win the series.
So which games do we win?
Give me Friday and Saturday. Give me Friday and Saturday.
Jeff?
Yeah, I had paid attention a little bit to Georgia. I know very little about Missouri. In fact, I don't even know, is this a road game or are they coming to Knoxville?
Knoxville.
Yeah, I mean, we should win the series. But as a guy who now thinks of us as a rebuilding program, I think of those teams as more volatile. And so there's ups and downs. I'm hoping that what everybody said about Georgia, maybe we're fixing some of our batting issues. And so we're on like an uphill trajectory back to elite status. And the right kind of program path would have you at least winning the series against Missouri. So that's what I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess that.
So 2-1?
Yeah, I'll go with that.
All right. Which games do you think we win?
I think that if we're better on paper the way you said, then I think they go ahead and take care of business and win the first 2. And then maybe they try some developmental stuff in the third game.
I'm going to go ahead and plant my flag, boys. I think Tennessee's sweeping this weekend. I think that Tennessee's going to. I think that Tennessee is going to bounce back in a big way. Nice weather in Knoxville this weekend. I think the boys are going to be ready to play. I think, Joe, what you said, I see us winning Friday and Saturday for sure. I feel very confident about those 2 games, especially the way Landon Mack's been pitching. Obviously, Coons is elite. I think Tennessee's going to make the adjustments at the plate. We're going to win Friday, going to win Saturday. And then because of that, I just think because of what happened on Sunday in Georgia, Tennessee's going to stay locked in, stay focused. I think we're going to win all 3.
I think you should make a hot wing bet on that.
Hot wing bet on that? All right. We can run it back. I'm down. I'm down to do it. I'm down. Let's do it.
But there needs to be. So does Jeff have to do the hot wings if sweep? Yeah, there's got to be some. There's got to be some skin in the game.
Yeah, I withdraw my request.
I'm also down to do something else. If you guys want to think of something else, we can run that. I'm cool.
All right. So here's my new proposal. Mac has to eat hot wings if we don't sweep. Okay. If we do sweep, he has to drink Tabasco sauce. How about that? Does that work?
Wait, if we do sweep, I also have to drink Tabasco sauce? Yeah. I don't think I'm going to take that deal.
Come on, man.
I feel very confident that we're going to sweep, and I don't want to drink Tabasco. So I'd rather eat the wings if we sweep.
That's fair. That's fair. I was just trying for a heads I win, tails you lose kind of scenario there.
Oh, me. All right. Well, guys, great episode, great podcast. Last I checked, Miami of Ohio was beating SMU, which I wouldn't say is unexpected, but is, maybe some people thought that Miami of Ohio might have been overrated, but we'll see how that game turns out. But Tennessee will play on Friday for basketball. We will play the winner of this game that's going on right now. That game is like at 3:30 Central Time, I believe.
Sounds right.
So that'll be an afternoon game. For those of you that get off work early on Fridays, make sure you tune in, support the Vols. Guys, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Go Vols.
It's terminal.
Awesome. Fans, just remember, or listeners, I should say, not fans, although we do want fans of the Volatile podcast, so please join. You can find us on YouTube. Please like and subscribe and share us there with your friends. Wherever you get your podcast, we're there as well. And on X, you can find us at @volatile_1998. It's been a tough season for basketball so far. We'll hope they right the ship here this weekend. Up and down so far for baseball, but I think there's reason to be optimistic if you can find it in your heart to reserve some of that untouched hurt that you have and just save it for the Vols baseball team. But just remember, guys, it's terminal. Have a good week.